Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this 37 lecture session of the course Computational Fluid Dynamics. Earlier, I told you that I'll talk about boundary conditions, but I thought that before going to the boundary condition, I'll first discuss about turbulence and its modeling, because turbulence is very important for the practical, industrial, and engineering applications. So whatever the practical processes we are having where fluid flow and heat transfer, mass transfer are involved, majority of the times we will be finding that these flows are operated under the turbulent regime, okay, in order to have better performance of the system. So that's why, because of the close association of the turbulence in heat transfer and mass transfer, I thought first to talk about to give brief introduction about turbulence, because turbulence is a very vast topic and it is even a semester long advanced course. Okay, so over here we will just briefly try to summarize the different concepts related to turbulence, and then I will explain you that how we can actually model the turbulence using the computational techniques. Okay, and once we have found the relevant boundary conditions, after that we will specifically after we have found the relevant governing equations for turbulence, then we will specifically talk about all the boundary conditions in detail. Okay, so the title I have given over here as turbulence and its modeling. So first we will talk about what is turbulence, and once we have understood the basic concepts of turbulence, then we will try to see that how we can model the turbulence, okay, using computational techniques. So let me start with a simple example. So over here I have actually considered measurement of velocity in turbulent flow. Okay, so what we are trying to do, let us consider that we may have any physical situation. It may be flow through a pipe, it may be flow over a flat plate, any situation. Okay, so at the moment we have considered, let us consider that it is nothing but flow through a channel. So while this flow is happening through a channel, and if we are considering that our situation is steady, so if our situation is steady, it means we will not be having any dependence on time. So if we are not having any dependence on time, it means our boundary conditions at left boundary, right boundary, and top and bottom, all the boundary conditions will be nothing but fixed. Fixed means these will not vary with time. Okay, so boundary conditions will not vary with time. So in case boundary conditions does not vary with time, and if we are having laminar flow situation, we will be finding that any point, say I have taken arbitrary some random point, and at this point, say I have placed some probe of, say, laser Doppler anemometer or hot wire anemometer. So these are nothing but devices which are used for measurement of the local instantaneous velocity. Okay, so if I take any specific location and my boundary conditions are fixed, which are not varying with time, and if we are operating under laminar conditions, we will be finding that at this specific location, I will be having some value of velocity u1, and this value of u1 will be nothing but will remain fixed, will remain constant. It will not change. Okay, but even though, however, in case of turbulent flow, even if I consider that my flow is, boundary conditions are fixed, then also we will be having some sort of unsteadiness into our flow. So what I have tried to convey over here, that if our boundary conditions are fixed and flow is laminar, then at any point within the flow domain, if we measure any property, that property will remain fixed at that particular location. That will not vary with time. Okay. However, if I take the similar situation, means I have flow through a channel, and here also my boundary conditions are fixed. These are not varying with time, but instead of laminar flow, now I have nothing but turbulent flow situation. So when I have turbulent flow situation, if once again I use the probe of say hot wire anemometer or laser Doppler anemometer, I'll be finding that velocity at this particular location, as I told you earlier, u1, it will not remain constant. Okay, it will not be constant. Rather, this u1 will become a strong function of time. Okay, so it will be showing some fluctuations in this value when we will be obtaining the velocity at different times. So it means unsteadiness is something which is inherent to turbulent flows. Okay, so this is one very, very important point over here, that in case of laminar flow, as I told you, that if our boundary conditions are not changing with time at any location within the domain, we will be having constant value of the flow parameter. However, in case of turbulent flow, even though our boundary conditions are fixed, but still, if the flow is happening under the turbulent regime, we will be having some unsteadiness in our flow parameters. It means unsteadiness is something which is inherent to turbulent flows. Whereas in case of laminar flow, unsteadiness will only come if our problem is of transient nature. It means if we are having some time dependent boundary conditions. Okay, so then only unsteadiness will come. Okay, so this plot, whatever I have given over here, u versus t, this is the measurement of velocity in some typical turbulent flow situation. Okay, so at any location in some turbulent flow, we have actually fixed some velocity measurement probe, and with the help of that velocity measurement probe, we have obtained the data of velocity, and that data of velocity we have tried to plot as a function of time. So you can see over here, this velocity, while we are having, it is having significant fluctuations. Okay, so it means these fluctuations shows nothing but unsteady behavior of the turbulent flow. Okay, so if we are having unsteady flow, always we have to consider temporal term into our governing equations. Okay, apart from that, temporal term is not only sufficient enough to account for the entire turbulence, because turbulence will lead to some additional forces into our consideration of the governing equations. Okay, so you can see over here, the velocity over here is too much random in nature, and it is actually randomly showing some fluctuations, some oscillations. Okay, and these oscillations are not having any specific pattern. So that's why it is very, very difficult to characterize and investigate the turbulent flows. Okay, so one important aspect over here we are having is that we apply some decomposition of the parameter. So what we do, for example, u is my turbulent velocity. So what we will be doing, this u we will be actually splitting into two components. Okay, so one is capital U, where capital U is kind of mean or average flow velocity. Okay, and we will be having some another component u dash. This u dash will be nothing but our fluctuating component. Okay, so it will be fluctuating component. So over here you can see that through these random fluctuations of the velocity, which we have plotted as function of time, we are having some mean line over here. So this mean line is having nothing but magnitude capital U. So this mean represents some average representative of the velocity, and then in order to account for the fluctuations about the mean, we have added some term u dash. So u dash over here at any time, at this time u dash is nothing but this particular magnitude, at other time u dash is some another value. So it means u dash is nothing but it is a strong function of time, whereas this u is something which we have actually taken as average value, and this average we do calculate for some time period delta t. How to decide this time period delta t, that I'll explain in the subsequent slides. Okay, So what we have done now, we have actually defined our variable into two parts. One part is actually mean velocity and another part is actually our fluctuating component, which is varying, fluctuating with time. So this type of decomposition of the flow variables has to be applied for each and every variable. This U I have only shown as a representative case. Instead of U, if you measure V, W, temperature, pressure, etc., every of the field variable will be showing such type of fluctuations. Okay, so all variables we have to write as the sum of mean component and the fluctuating component. Okay, so this type of decomposition of our actual field variable is something which is known as Reynolds decomposition. Okay, and Reynolds decomposition is very, very important while we will be deriving the governing equations involving turbulence. Okay, till this point everything is clear to all?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now as I told you that in case of turbulent flow, what we will be having actually a lot of fluctuations in the velocity. Okay, so these fluctuations in the velocity, if you try to see, can be seen in terms of some random and chaotic flow structures within our domain. So if I consider pipe flow, you have studied in the undergraduate courses that in laminar flow we will be having some streamlines which will be moving in some specific pattern, and flow will be actually very much aligned with the surface of the pipe. Whereas in case of turbulent flow, we will not be having any specific pattern. We will be having some random structures into our flow. Okay, so these random structures are nothing but these are having certain rotation associated with these, and these rotating flow structures are nothing but specifically called as turbulent eddies. Okay, so what we do, these type of rotating structures which are present in our flow, we call these as turbulent eddies. Okay, so while we will be visualizing any turbulent flow situation, we will be able to observe that some of the turbulent eddies are very large, which are of the size of your pipe, say of the length scale of these turbulent eddies is actually of the order of diameter of the pipe. Some of the eddies may be very, very small and very localized one, and some of the eddies will be having some intermediate size in between the large eddies and the small eddies. Okay, so now into our flow, turbulent flow, each of these eddies are having their specific characteristics. The very first part is that as these eddies are rotating, so it is for sure that they are carrying certain amount of energy. But from where that energy is coming, basically that energy comes nothing from the mean flow only. So in order to allow the flow from left to right, we are supplying certain amount of pressure and velocity. So it means we are having certain pump which is doing some amount of work. Okay, so from that pump work, actually we are transmitting some energy into the fluid. So this entire mean flow which is moving from left to right, that is having some sort of energy, and that energy is actually being transferred to these random flow structures. Okay, so that particular energy, how it is actually transformed into intermediate large and small eddies, that is something which defines one energy cascade over here. So how to obtain that energy cascade, that let us try to see. Okay, so the very first point is, if I define Reynolds number. Okay, so what is the definition of Reynolds number? Can you tell me from our understanding of the complete pure laminar flow situation? So definition of Reynolds number is nothing but U into L divided by nu, where this nu is nothing but our kinematic viscosity. Okay, so now this L is something which is a characteristic length dimension and U is characteristic velocity dimension. Okay, now if I talk about, say, large eddies, if I talk about large eddies, let me consider that small l is the length of the large eddies and some velocity v is the velocity of large eddies, and based on this, if I have to define the Reynolds number of large eddies, that will be nothing but equal to v velocity into L divided by nu. Now, as I earlier told you just now, that for the case of large eddies, our length of the eddy will be almost of the order of length of the pipe, means characteristic length dimension, and similarly velocity of large eddies will also be of the order of velocity of the mean flow. Okay, so under this circumstance, I can simply say that my Reynolds number of the mean flow is nothing but of the order of Reynolds number of the large eddy. Okay, now if we take even a very, very simplified situation where, say, our mean flow velocity u is nothing but 1 meter per second, and length of the, say, system is around 0.1 meter, and over this our air is flowing. So if air is flowing, so obviously viscosity, kinematic viscosity will be of the order of 10 to power minus 6 meters square per second. Okay, so from here, if you try to calculate the Reynolds number, you will be finding Reynolds number of L, which is nothing but of the order of Reynolds number of the largest eddy, that will be somewhere around of the order of 10 to power 5. So if we are having very high Reynolds number associated with the large eddies, it means in case of large eddies, our viscous effects are very, very less, and majority of the large eddies are nothing but governed by the inertia dominant effects of the mean flow. So if these are dominated by the inertia dominant effect, it means they receive certain amount of energy from our mean flow. Okay, so it means mean flow transforms the energy which is actually leading to turbulence in the form of large eddies. That energy is this large eddies has received that particular energy from nothing but our mean flow. Okay, now let us now consider that along with the large eddies, we are having some small eddies also. So say length scale of small eddy is eta, and velocity of small eddy is, say, capital V. And if now I define the Reynolds number of the small eddy, that will be Re eta will be nothing but equal to V into eta divided by nu. Okay, so now over here what will be happening? You will be finding that because length scale of the smaller eddies will be very, very small. Okay, so smaller eddies means smallest rotating fluid structure present into our flow. So smallest fluid structure present into the flow is of the order of 0.01 to around 0.1 mm. So if we are having very small length scale of the smaller eddies, in that case what will be happening? This Reynolds number will be having order close to 1. So if this is having order close to 1, it means the smaller, for the case of smaller eddies, inertial and viscous effects are of same order. Okay, so inertial and viscous effects are of same order. So this now makes one important conclusion. So the first point is that in case of large eddies, we are having dominance of only inertia, and viscous effect is negligible. So if in case of large eddies, viscous effects are negligible, it means we will not be having any loss of energies in large eddies. So it means large eddies are nothing but our inviscid eddies, where angular momentum of the rotation of these structures will be remaining constant. Okay, so we will not be having any energy loss because of the large eddies, because in case of large eddies, viscous effects are negligible. But if we talk about small eddies, in case of small eddies, we are having actually the equal relative importance of inertia and viscous effect. So if we are having dominance of or equal relative importance of both the forces, it means whatever rotation we are having, that rotation will be actually dissipated by the viscous forces present in the small eddies. Okay, so it means the small eddies, whatever energy we will be supplying to small eddies, that energy will be doing work against the viscous forces. So that's why energy content of the smaller eddies will not be remaining always, will not be always having high amplitude, because some of the energy will be wasted in overcoming the viscous forces. So it means the smaller eddies are the ones responsible for dissipation of energy in turbulent flow. Okay, so if smaller eddies are leading to dissipation of energy, so obviously this will lead to generation of certain heat in the form of internal energy of the fluid also. Okay, so because of the smaller eddies only, heat generation takes place into our turbulent flow situation. Now, first point we have to consider over here, because in case of larger eddies, inertia effects are dominant. So that's why these larger eddies receives energy nothing but from our mean flow, whereas in case of smaller eddies, they cannot receive direct energy from the mean flow, so they exchange the energy with the larger eddies when these come in influence of the larger eddies. Okay, one important point also we have to make over here, as I told you, that in case of small eddies, we will be having the dominance of viscosity. So that's why whatever the energy present, energy will be there with these smaller eddies, that will be dissipated by the viscous effects. Whereas in case of large eddies, the energy will not be dissipated, because these are nothing but our inviscid eddies. Okay, so due to this, one important energy spectrum we can prepare, we can say that the largest eddies into our flow are the ones which have highest spectral energy. Okay, and the smaller energy, as the eddies keeps on decreasing in their size, their spectral energy actually decreases. Okay, so how to explain this point? Let me first define what is spectral energy. So what is kinetic energy associated with the flow? So if I talk about turbulent kinetic energy, that will be nothing but half of kinetic energy per unit mass. So kinetic energy per unit mass will be half of V square, and if we are having turbulent flow, then obviously I will be calling V dash square. Okay, so if you see, the unit of this one is nothing but meter square divided by second square. So this is the unit of kinetic energy per unit mass. But if I talk about spectral energy, so spectral energy is nothing but energy, EK is nothing but energy per unit wave number, where wave number is nothing but 2 pi by lambda. Okay, so lambda will come in the numerator. So lambda is nothing but having scale equal to that of the length scale of the eddy. So if I consider this as distance dimension, so our dimension of the spectral energy will be meter cube per second square. Okay, so that is what spectral energy, meter cube per second square, I have plotted as function of the wave number, where wave number is nothing but 2 pi by lambda. So you can see, when wave number is small, because wave number is equal to 2 pi by lambda, so when wave number is small, it means wavelength is large. So when wavelength is large, at that time eddies are having highest energy, and as wavelength is actually increasing, along with increase of the wavelength, the energy of the turbulent kinetic energy per unit mass per unit wave number is actually decreasing. So this particular association of the energy with the size of the turbulent eddies is something which is known as energy cascade. Okay, so the meaning of energy cascade is larger eddies will be having highest energy, and as the size of eddies will be decreasing, their associated amount of energy will also decrease. Okay, now it is always important to find out that what is the relationship in between the largest wavelengths, largest length scales and smallest length scales of the turbulent eddies. So for largest length scales, I have already told you that these are nothing but of the order of size of the domain. However, in case of smaller, what we have to do, we have to relate these with the size of the domain. So as I told you that L and V are the length and velocity scale of large eddies, and eta and this V are the length and velocity scales of smaller eddies. So if we do some dimensional analysis in between the larger eddies and smaller eddies, and based on the dimensional homogeneity, there are some relations which are proposed over here, and these relations are nothing but eta by L. So eta is length scale of the smallest eddy and L is length scale of the largest eddy. So eta by L is nothing but nearly equal to Reynolds number of the largest eddy power minus 3 by 4. Similarly, if we compare the time scale, so time scale of the smallest eddy, as I told you that eddies will be having certain rotating component, so these will be having some fluctuations with the time. Okay, so some of the eddies will be having fluctuations slow, some will be having very fast fluctuations. So if we compare the relative time scale in between small and large eddies, that can be represented as Reynolds number of the largest eddy power minus 1 by 2. Similarly, if we compare velocity scale of smallest eddy divided by velocity of largest eddy, that is nothing but Reynolds number power minus 1 by 4. So whatever the scales, eta, tau, and V we have got for the smallest eddies present in the domain. So these are nothing but corresponding to smallest eddies. So these are specifically known as Kolmogorov microscales. So these are known as Kolmogorov microscales. Okay. Why Kolmogorov microscales? Because Kolmogorov was a Russian scientist who have contributed a lot in determining the structure of turbulence in 1940s. So just to give the recognition to his work, actually these eddies has been given the name based on his name. Okay, so it is called as Kolmogorov microscales. Now, one important point I have told you that when we are having largest eddies available, then we have seen that we are having dominance of inertia and there is no dissipation. So that's why the spectral energy of largest eddies is nothing but proportional to length scale and square of the velocity scale. Okay, and in case of smallest eddies, as I told you that there is the relative importance of inertia and viscosity. So viscosity will lead to dissipation of the energy. So that's why for smallest eddies, if we see the spectral energy, that is nothing but proportional to velocity scale power 5 by 4 into epsilon 1 by 4. Okay, and some scale has to be defined in between the largest eddies and the smallest eddies. Okay, so this energy V square into L is something which will be applicable in this large wavelength region, and this energy which is actually associated with the dissipative component, that will be applicable in this particular region where we are having actually very small wavelengths, but we are having certain intermediate wavelengths also. So for defining the intermediate wavelengths, this particular energy equation has been proposed, that energy is nothing but equal to alpha times k power minus 5 by 3 into epsilon 2 by 3. So this epsilon over here is one very, very important quantity, which is called as nothing but rate of dissipation of turbulent energy. Rate of dissipation of turbulent kinetic energy. Okay, how to determine this rate? So this is nothing but, if K is our kinetic energy, so rate of kinetic energy will be dk by dt. So dk by dt is nothing but our epsilon if dk by dt is actually decreasing. So if dk by dt is decreasing, it means its rate of change of kinetic energy is actually decreasing. It means kinetic energy amount is decreasing. That shows nothing but dissipation. So that's why this epsilon is called as nothing but rate of dissipation of turbulent kinetic energy. Okay, so considering this, for the intermediate eddies, some number, this k is over here wave number, so it has been presented as alpha times wave number to power minus 5 by 3 into epsilon 2 by 3, where epsilon is rate of dissipation of turbulent kinetic energy. So value of this coefficient alpha over here is nothing but equal to 1.5. So you can see this is the equation, and in the intermediate region, which is very close to, say, for value of k about 1000, so this relationship is actually applicable. Okay, so this is how we can actually define the energy cascade which is associated with the different turbulent eddies. Is this point clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so now let me move ahead. Now comes the very, very important point. The point is, what is there in our flow actually which is causing it to become turbulent? Even if we consider very, very smooth flow, then also our flow changes from laminar flow situation to turbulent flow situation in some specific range of Reynolds number. Okay, so what is there in our flow which causes the flow to change from laminar to turbulent? So can anyone answer this question? What is there in our flow which changes flow from laminar to turbulent? Any one of you would like to answer or give some thought?
Sir, velocity, higher velocity.
Yeah, but still, say if we are having some velocity which is perfectly aligned, why immediately that velocity will try to create some chaotic mixing and random turbulent structures. Okay, so let me explain this concept. So if we talk about the practical flow situations, in practical flow situations, always, even if we ensure that we have perfectly made each and every component, but still when flow will be entering into the passage, at the point of interface, at the point of its entry into the flow domain, there will be some small disturbances which will be always present. Okay, now it depends upon the flow conditions if to amplify these small disturbances which are present in the flow or to diminish these disturbances. Okay, so this particular thing theoretically can be found using nothing but linear hydrodynamic stability theory. Okay, so in case of, it is quite evident from the practical perspective that there will be some small flow disturbances, but when we will be doing the theoretical analysis, so at that time our equations will be perfectly fine. Okay, so there are no disturbances into the equation. So what we do in case of linear hydrodynamic stability theory, we provide some initial small perturbation, and based on the flow parameters, we try to calculate with the linear stability theory whether this perturbation will be amplifying further with the time or it will be actually decaying and diminishing. Okay, so that is something which is answered by the linear hydrodynamic stability stability theory. Okay, so there are basically two different theories: inviscid instability and viscous instability. So I have plotted over here two velocity profiles. So the first velocity profile over here includes some point of inflection. So this point of inflection nothing but shows the change of curvature. Over here we are having some different sign of curvature, and in this region we are having some different sign for the curvature. Okay, so this particular type of velocity profile is something. So this side I am showing velocity vectors and this is my distance y. Okay, so this type of velocity profile is something which is evident in the flows where we are having adverse pressure gradients. Adverse pressure gradient means del P by del X is nothing but greater than 0. Okay, and in majority of our flows, we will be finding that we are having some smooth velocity profile where the curvature is same and there is no point of inflection. Okay, so this type of velocity profile is evident in majority of the flows where we are having actually favorable pressure gradient, means del P by del X is less than 0. Okay. Now, it has been observed that when we are having this type of velocity profile, if we give some small perturbation into our governing equations, these perturbation, if we neglect the velocities in our linear hydrodynamic stability theory, if we neglect the velocity, then we will be finding that always these perturbations will be amplifying and making our flow as nothing but turbulent. So that's why majority of the time you might have observed when we are having flow over some structures, okay, say flow over a cylinder, flow over a sphere. So we find that near the end of that periphery of that particular object, there is some negative, this type of velocity profile, and that is particularly known as flow separation. And you will be finding that after the flow separation, there will be formation of some vortex-like structures. Okay, so these vortex-like structures are nothing but the perturbation which were present at that point. These has actually amplified and resulted in some turbulent flow situations in the wake of that object. Okay, so over here, in the hydrodynamic stability theory, viscosity was neglected, and it was found when viscosity is neglected, then if we give any small perturbation, that will be amplifying into the flow and it will be making our flow nothing but turbulent. Even when the viscosity is included and the velocity profile is considered with point of inflection, then even upon inclusion of the viscosity also, it is found that for almost all the range of Reynolds numbers, if we have this type of velocity profile, there will be always amplification of the perturbation and flow will change to turbulent situation. Okay, so this type of instability is particularly referred to as inviscid instability. Okay, then comes the second situation where, say, we are having flow over a flat plate. So for a flow over a flat plate, in the favorable pressure gradient conditions, we will be having some smooth pressure profile, smooth velocity profile. So in this smooth velocity profile, when we have given the perturbation and applied the stability theory, it was found that there is, at very low Reynolds number conditions, there is decay of the perturbation. Similarly, at very high Reynolds number also, there is decay of the perturbation. But there is some intermediate range of Reynolds number over which actually there happens the amplification of the perturbations. Okay, so that particular reason is responsible for change of flow from laminar to turbulent. Okay, so what I told that at very low and very high, there is decay of the perturbations, but we are having some range of Reynolds numbers. So let me define two Reynolds number over here. One I am calling as critical Reynolds number. So this I am defining as, say, U times X critical divided by mu, and another I am defining, say, Reynolds number transition. Okay, so TRANS, and that I am calling as, say, U X TRANS and divided by nu. So when I will be having flow over a flat plate, so for the flow over a flat plate, if L is length of the plate, okay, so if I have to define local Reynolds number at any distance x, if my x varies in this direction, say my length of the plate is in such a fashion so that at some point I am finding my one Reynolds number as nothing but Re critical, and in that same plate I am finding some occurrence of the Reynolds number as nothing but Re trans. So this is nothing but corresponding to X trans, and this is corresponding to X critical. So this X critical to X trans is some reason in which actually our, if any perturbation is present in the flow, that perturbation will be actually amplifying. Okay, so this is the condition which is actually for onset of the amplification of perturbations, and This is the condition after which our flow completely becomes turbulent, because whatever perturbation has become, now these cannot further amplify in the next region. Okay, so these perturbations now will be moving with the flow. Okay, so this particular region over here, this band of Reynolds number, is something which is obtained from the instability, from the linear stability analysis, and it is found that in this region we are having actually viscous instability. It means if any perturbation will be present in the flow, that will be actually amplifying and making our flow situation chaotic. Okay, so before this we say our flow is laminar, and this particular zone in between these two Reynolds number is something which is known as transition band. Okay, so here our actually flow transition happens from laminar to turbulent, and after this transition Reynolds number limit, we will be having pure turbulent flow, and whatever the eddies are present, these will be moving, and there will not be any further amplification of the any other perturbation. Okay, so many of the times when we will be talking about resolving different flow conditions, either we refer to the laminar flow situation or we refer to the turbulent flow situation. Okay, so this transition flow situation is actually very, very difficult to understand, very, very difficult to analyze. So majority of the time we consider this transient flow situation as turbulence only. We resolve it using turbulence only, and moreover this approximation also works well because this transition range is actually very, very narrow in comparison to the overall size of the domain in majority of the practical applications. Okay, so but this is the main region which is responsible for occurrence of turbulence into our flow condition. Okay, so till this point it is clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now next comes, when we are having our turbulent flow, we have to characterize this turbulent flow. Okay, so for characterizing the turbulent flow, what we have to do, we have to actually use some different notations which will be becoming later on part of our governing equations, and based on that only we will be able to characterize the flow situation. Okay, so the very first parameter over here is something which we call as mean value. So mean value is nothing but, as I told you, that if we are having some fluctuation of phi with t, so if we take some time period delta t, if for that delta t time period we take the average of these fluctuations, that is something which is defined by this mean value. So you can see over here phi mean is nothing but 1 divided by delta t, integration from 0 to delta t phi t dt. So this is the time average of the time average representative of the parameter. Okay, now ideally what should happen, that for our turbulent flow situation we should consider delta t approaching to infinity. Okay, and then we should calculate the time average, but that is something which will not be always possible. Okay, so what we have to do over here, while we have to select this time period delta t, we have to be very, very careful. So we do two observations. First thing what we do, if our flow is steady, we try to calculate the time scale of all largest as well as the smallest eddies present into the flow. So the time scale of largest eddy was capital T and time scale of smallest eddy was small tau. Okay, so we try to see that out of this tau and t, which one is fast, because some of the eddies will be fast, some of the eddies will be slow. So we try to find out the slowest eddy. Generally our large eddies are considered as the slowest eddies. So we try to find out that whatever the largest eddy which is present into our flow structure, what is the time scale of that eddy, and we try to consider delta t greater than or nearly equal to that order of the largest time scale of the eddy which is present. Okay, so this is corresponding to the slowest eddy present into our situation. That is something which is applicable for the steady flow considerations. But steady means when our boundary conditions are fixed. So boundary conditions are not changing with time. We may have some situation where our BCs are actually function of time. So if boundary conditions are function of time, so in that case, what will be happening? We will not be able to define some delta t period over which we can take the average. Why? Because every time, though we are having some fluctuation, but we will not be able to distinguish whether that fluctuation is because of the turbulence or that fluctuation is because of the changes which happened in the boundary conditions. Okay, so that is very difficult to characterize. So that's why the resolving unsteady flow situation is even more complex. So for resolving the unsteady flows, what we do, we try to consider, try to do the different experiments. Say this is my experiment 1. So in experiment 1, at some time t1, I will try to measure some velocity at some location u1 as, and that will be applicable for some time variable boundary conditions. Similarly, under the identical conditions, once again I will repeat the experiment and I will try to find out some another variation u1 dash by keeping the time and boundary condition as same. So it means we do repeat number of experiments, and from number of experiments at the same location, whatever velocity data we are getting, that velocity data will be actually making our spectrum, and we try to take the average of that particular spectrum. So that's why treatment of unsteady turbulent flows is even more complex, and this kind of averaging is something which is known as ensemble averaging. Okay, now once we have defined some mean value, if we take the mean of the fluctuating component, the mean of the fluctuating component will be nothing but equal to 0, because over here you have first taken the average of all these, and that average you have represented as the capital phi. Okay, now these, as this is the average representative, so obviously whatever the fluctuating component above it, whatever area fluctuating component will be making, that area below will be actually same. So that's why the sum of the fluctuating component, the average of the fluctuating component will be nothing but equal to 0. Another important parameter which we have to, which we will be using is nothing but variance of the parameter phi. So variance of the parameter phi, which is something which represents the spectrum of that parameter about the mean value. Okay, so variance we define as phi dash square and bar of that. So in order to make bar, we have to take time average. So time average I am considering 1 by delta t integration 0 to delta t, and in order to make it variance, we are doing phi dash square into dt. Okay, along with the variance, the important parameter is root mean square velocity also. So root mean square velocity is nothing but square root of the variance. So this particular component, this particular parameter will be helping us in finding the values of u dash square, v dash square, and w dash square, where u dash, v dash, w dash are nothing but fluctuating components of velocities in x, y, and z direction, and variance of these two will be becoming later on important part of our equations, governing equations, and these when multiplied with density will be becoming nothing but our turbulent stresses in the normal direction. Okay, and this root mean square value is something which forms the basis for turbulent kinetic energy. We define turbulent kinetic energy per unit mass as nothing but half of u dash square plus v dash square plus w dash square, and bar also we will be considering. So that is something which will be becoming the basis. Root mean square value will be becoming the basis for defining the turbulent kinetic energy. Also, so this is what I have shown over here, turbulent kinetic energy. Along with the turbulent kinetic energy, another important parameter is nothing but turbulent intensity. Okay, so turbulent intensity is something which is defined as average of RMS velocities divided by reference velocity. Okay, and in terms of, if we present this in terms of the turbulent kinetic energy, it can be, turbulent intensity can be represented as 2 by 3 K power 1 by 2 divided by U reference. Okay. Then we are having another important quantity. We also try to calculate the movements of variables. Okay. So this particular movement, which I have calculated for the product of phi dash into psi dash, this is something which is called as second movement. Okay. So it is called as second movement. So when we consider both phi dash equal to psi dash equal to u dash, in that case, this will be becoming nothing but equal to u dash into u dash, which is nothing but our u dash square bar. So u dash square bar is nothing but our variance. So when variance is also nothing but second movement, when we are considering both the variables as same. But if our variables are different, in that case, second movement is defined as phi dash into psi dash bar, which is 1 by delta t integral 0 to delta t into phi dash psi dash dt. Okay. So this phi dash into psi dash will also become very, very important part of the process. So it will form vector something like this: u dash into v dash bar, v dash into w dash bar, and u dash into w dash bar. Okay. So all these three will be becoming nothing but, when multiplied with density, these will be becoming part of the turbulent shear stresses in our governing equations. Okay. So these will be turbulent shear stresses in the governing equations. Then if we take the third moment, so third moment of a variable phi, that will be becoming phi dash power 3, and this is nothing but similar to our skewness in the statistics. So it will be representing that if our spectrum is how much asymmetric. Okay. Then if we take the fourth power, then fourth movement, then it becomes nothing but our kurtosis. It shows that how much our spectrum is having peakness. Okay. Then we are having some other descriptors for defining the turbulent flow. So these descriptors are nothing but defined corresponding to the differences in time or differences in space. So the first one over here is actually, we are having some parameter phi dash. We have obtained its value at time t, and we have also obtained its value at time t plus tau. Okay. And if we take the average of these values, that is something which is defined by 1 by delta t 0 to delta t phi dash into phi dash t plus tau dt. Okay. So this type of relationship in between the turbulent parameters which are separated by some time period tau is something, when our both the parameters are same, we call this kind of relation as nothing but autocorrelation. Okay. So this is called as autocorrelation between the parameters. This same can be defined at same time t, but our measurement of the parameter may be separated by some distance. So that is something which is defined over here. So one phi is obtained at location x position, and another is located at x plus zeta. So this zeta is actually some distance which is taken from position x. Okay. Now, if over here our tau and zeta approaches to 0. So when our tau and zeta approaches to 0, it will be becoming nothing but phi t into phi t, and here also it will be becoming phi x comma t into phi x comma t. So it means this autocorrelation will become nothing but our variance, and when our tau and zeta will be approaching to 0, at that time our variables will be having the perfect correlation between the two. So that's why the magnitude of this r phi phi tau and r phi phi zeta, when these are approaching to 0, that magnitude will be actually maximum. Okay. And when the values of these parameters tau and zeta will be approaching to infinity. So if these are approaching to infinity, it means either we are taking the measurement at very large time difference, or at very different locations in space. So there, what will be happening? The correlations between the two measurements will not be there, and the values of these parameters will be becoming nothing but 0. Okay. Now, when we apply these measurements for two different variables, say, so phi I have measured at time t, and instead of now phi, I have measured some another variable psi at time t plus delta t. So my this equation will become now psi dash. Over here also it will be becoming psi dash. So when we apply this particular formulation for two different variables, then it represents the relationship between the two different variables. So in that case, it is called as nothing but cross correlation. Okay. Another important parameter we are having is probability density function. So we call this as nothing but PDF. So probability density function P phi star d phi star is something which is defined as probability of phi in between the values phi star and phi star plus d phi star. So this is something which actually defines that how much is the origin of a parameter, in what range that parameter is actually completely confined. Obviously, if we do the integration of minus infinity to plus infinity, P of phi star d phi star, that will be becoming nothing but equal to 1. Because if we are having any parameter phi star in between minus infinity and infinity, that entirely will be occupied. So that's why we will be having probability of occurrence between that zone as nothing but equal to 1. So this probability density function is also correlated with the mean and nth moment. So with mean, it can be given as integration from minus infinity to infinity phi into P of phi d phi, and with nth moment it can be given as phi dash n into P phi dash into d phi dash. Okay, so the applicability of this probability density function becomes in nothing but our specific type of CFD problems, and more importantly, it comes into consideration when we are dealing with the combustion problems. Okay, because when we are having the combustion, then we try to assign some probability density function for our flow of the fuel particles. Okay, so as these fuel particles will be having some specific probability, so based on these, if we have to measure the turbulent fluctuations, then we can apply these correlations in between the PDF and the mean parameters. Okay, so till this point it is clear. Whatever I have explained till this point, is it clear to all? Please say yes or no. If you are having any doubt, you may ask.
Sir, will you please summarize the, you can say, transition from laminar to turbulence?
Okay, so in case of laminar to turbulent flow transition, basically, as in practical scenarios, there will be small flow disturbances into our system. So these flow disturbances will be amplifying in certain range of Reynolds number. So if we are not reaching that band of Reynolds number, then obviously these perturbations will be dying down. But if we are somehow, our domain is actually entering into some situation where we are reaching in that band of Reynolds number, where actually these perturbations can amplify, these will be amplifying and leading to the transition from laminar to turbulent flow. Okay. And what is that range of Reynolds number? That is something which can be obtained from linear hydrodynamic stability theory. Okay. Now I will stop at this point and we will have further discussion in our next lecture.